Is this the turning point for West Virginia basketball? It might just be. I'm Schuyler Callihan. This is another episode of Between the Eers. We thank you guys for tuning in here on this fine Wednesday morning or Tuesday morning, if you will. West Virginia coming off a big win over number 25 Texas, snapping their losing skid, getting their first Big 12 win. Schuyler getting his first top 25 win. And for a second, we can pretend or maybe think that this thing is going to turn. And this is a part of the schedule where I've kind of looked at for a while now and said, well, if West Virginia can get through, those first handful of games in the Big 12, that's where they can really start to gain some ground here after this week, that is. But first, let's start with the Texas win. For the first time in quite a while, West Virginia looked really good on offensive side of the ball, or on the offensive end of the ball, or of the floor, I should say. I'm still stuck in football mode here, where they were actually running some sets. They weren't just standing there and looking like a stagnant offense. They were swinging the ball, moving it. Didn't have a ton of assists, but you could tell a difference. And I don't know if that's something that, just is starting to come together now that these guys have played for a few games with each other, and you're starting to get that chemistry and that knowledge of what each other is going to do on the floor at any given time. But that was the best the offense has looked. And I don't even think it's close. West Virginia's failed to score over 70 points all but a handful of times this season. And to do that against Texas, it's pretty impressive. But I also want to note that the defensive end was much better. I mean, they gave up 73, but it's a whole lot better than giving up 89. So, I think there's some things there that you can build on. I think that at times, whenever things get a little rough, they can go into that 2-3 zone. That's, of course, unless the other team is just shooting the ball like crazy and shooting the lights out of the gym. But I think there's some different things that they can do defensively that they can go to, because, early in the season, they had to go to that 2-3 zone. They had no choice. They had no depth. They had no really ability to go to anything but a 2-3. And now that they've got some guys back, they've gone to man. But now that they can fall into that 2-3, they can play some pack line defense at times. They have options. And for the first time this whole entire season, Schuyler has options on both ends of the floor. So this is going to start to look like a little bit more of a desirable product. And that's why I think when you look at this upcoming schedule, this is a really, really interesting game coming up here Wednesday. Oklahoma's lost 2 straight. They've lost to TCU by 9, and then they lost to Kansas, which no one's going to fault you for losing to Kansas, and TCU's not that bad either. But this is a Oklahoma team that could maybe be overlooking West Virginia. You've lost 2 straight. You think you got one in your back pocket and you can get back on track. But I don't know. There's some games that I just, even though it doesn't make sense that West Virginia should win, I think that this is one of them where I think they can actually win this game. And the same could be said for Saturday against Kansas. Call me crazy. I understand it. And we may look back at this episode in a week and West Virginia goes 0-2, and you're probably thinking, what the hell was he thinking? But Um, I don't know. I like their chances because you found some confidence now in your lineup with Pat Sumnick. He's starting to find himself. Kirk Crease is playing much better. Raekwon Battle is starting to have to not do everything now. He can kind of step back and be more of a complete player. Your bench can give you better minutes. I just think this team is starting to gel a little bit. And Wednesday, well, actually today, by the way, marks the 1 month period for Jesse Edwards since he's been out, or at least I should say since the injury. I would say probably Wednesday or Thursday would be the 1 month mark from his surgery. So it was expected to be a 4 week recovery, right about at that 4 week mark, but it sounds like they're probably about a week or so behind on that. But that's not alarming by any means. They're just making very clear that they're not going to throw him out there until he's 1,000% ready to go, and they should. But if they can, they don't have to win these next two games. It's not like they absolutely have to win these next two. If they can just win one of them, all right. You look at the 3 games following that, very very winnable games. UCF, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati. Two of those three are on the road, but it's not like you're shaking in your boots about going to Orlando or going to Stillwater against a team that's now 8-8 on the year. The schedule starts to get a little easier. Not, I mean, it is the Big 12, so any given night you're going to have challenges, but it's not what they've gone through here in these first 4 or 5 games in the Big 12, where they've had to play Houston, Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma, Kansas. It's going to get a little lighter. But the point of my episode today is not just identifying a possibility of things getting turned now. It's more so looking deep into the future and looking into March. Because let's be honest, even if West Virginia wins both of these games against Oklahoma and against Kansas, it, it's still going to be a miracle to get all the way back into a position where you can feel good about receiving an at-large bid for the NCAA tournament. I mean, you're 6-10, 2 wins, even against these two opponents, puts you at 8-10. You're still way behind the 8 ball, and I don't know what it would take for them to get an at-large. I mean, usually if you start getting around that 14-15 loss mark, it's a very very hairy situation. So you're talking about razor thin margin here. And I would be willing to argue that 14 or 15 losses is probably way too much for this team, considering the losses that they had early in the year, which the committee is probably going to dock them for, regardless of the fact that they didn't have their full complement of players. So they're probably having to stick around that 12 to 13 range. And that's just almost impossible, especially with what we've already seen so far this year. And that's not to say that I don't believe this thing can get turned and they can start winning some games. I mean, that's just, even West Virginia's best years, they're not going 15-3 in conference play. They're not going 16-2 in conference play. It's sure as hell not going to happen with this roster. It's just not. So you need this thing to really turn as soon as possible, not just because not to build your at large possibilities, because like I said, I think that's out the window. But you need to get to the Big 12 tournament with a legitimate chance of making a run. And To do that, you need to be a little bit higher up in the Big 12 standings. But right now, you're really not in a bad position through 3 games. At least you've got to win. You're not sitting here at 0-3 like you're Oklahoma State, and you're in the same boat as a lot of these quote unquote really good teams. Houston's 1-2. Their only win is West Virginia. Texas 1-2. BYU 1-2. Oklahoma 1-2. So yeah, beating an Oklahoma or beating a Kansas is going to do a hell of a lot of good in terms of the Big 12 standings. And that's really what West Virginia fans want to pay attention to right now. Again, get the at-large bid status out of your mind. It's not even worth thinking about. The number one thing I would say for West Virginia is you want to finish somewhere realistically top top 10, top 10 in the Big 12. And if you can get Jesse Edwards back within the next, let's say 2 weeks, if you get him back in the next 2 weeks, I think that is absolutely 100% possible, assuming they don't sustain any other major injuries along the way or have any other sort of crazy setbacks or other situations that pop up. Because I mean, this is Josh Eilert's luck, and as soon as you start to feel good about something, something goes wrong. So let's just assume that nothing goes wrong and everybody stays healthy. Top 10 is absolutely in play. Oklahoma State, they are, I think they'll get progressively better. Mike Boynton, they do this almost every year where they really struggle at the beginning. They get better as the year goes on. But this team, in my opinion, is really going to have a hard time figuring it out. And I think you're going to see some of these newcomers like a Cincinnati and a UCF and perhaps maybe even BYU who have gotten off to good starts in non-con play. They're going to start to fall back down to earth here. All right, and I think you could say maybe even the same thing for Oklahoma, who got off to a really good start. You look at their non-con schedule, and it's not like they have this amazing resume. They just won a bunch of games early, got that ranking beside their name. They kept winning and kept climbing up the rankings. So getting in the top 10 is 100% possible. And if you can get in the top 10, obviously you like your chances a little bit better than if you finish 14th in the league. And then you've got to climb out of the almost most impossible situation to make a run in the Big 12 tournament, Kansas City. So that's what the focus should be on. It shouldn't be about the at-large. It shouldn't be about building a resume, because that doesn't matter. It's about getting this thing turned as quickly as possible so that you're putting yourself in a position to do damage in Kansas City. And I'm not saying this as if, okay, if West Virginia starts to turn things around and they make a run in Kansas City, say they get to the Big 12 championship game, they lose. Well, if the record's around a 500 record, or or if they're over 500, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be hard as hell to leave them out, because the committee loves to take into effect what you most recently did, and that's what sticks in their brain the most. If you go into Kansas City and you make that big run and say you win, I don't know, let's say 7-8 games in the Big 12, it's going to be hard to leave this team out. It's really going to be hard to leave this team out. But I don't know. It's a tough situation. I understand you got to take this one game at a time, but being in my seat in the media, and you guys that are fans, we can all look ahead into these things and kind of project. But I think there's a legitimate chance here if they were to split one of these next 2 games, because you've got to get some wins over these teams that are supposed to or expected to finish in the top half of the Big 12. And then you've also got to take care of, obviously, the teams that are supposed to finish in the bottom half. I understand it's not rocket science. I'm not breaking any news here with any of that stuff, but um, this is a golden opportunity here for West Virginia, because you look at Oklahoma again, they're going to be overlooking you. I have a really gut feeling about this. I know West Virginia hasn't had a lot of success out in Norman in years past, but you go out to Norman, you find a way to win. All of a sudden, you've won 2 straight games, both of which came against top 25 teams. You come back home and you play Kansas on a Saturday evening, and everybody and their brother in Morgantown is going to be out at that game. It's going to be a raucous atmosphere for Kansas, as it always is. And regardless of record, regardless of how the teams have played up to that point, West Virginia has always had a chance, seemingly, against Kansas. Like I mentioned last week on, I believe it was the post-game show, the year Jermaine Haley was a senior. I can't remember who else was on that team that season, but I, I think that was the year they didn't go to the tournament. I think that was pre-Oscar Sheboy, I think. But that year, you would have said there's no way in hell that they're going to beat Kansas. And what happened? Jermaine Haley, game winner. So I think it's possible they can sweep this week. And if they sweep this week, you're sitting here at 3-2 in Big 12 play. And you only need to, in my opinion, get to, let's say 8 or 7 or 8 wins in the conference to finish in the top 10. Like your chances. So let me know what you think here in the YouTube comments. What West Virginia needs to do to get inside the top 10 of the Big 12 Conference. What do you think they need to do just on the floor? What do they need to improve to get better, to put themselves in a position to make a run when they get to Kansas City here in a couple of months? So that'll do it for me here today on Between the Ears. I'm Schuyler Callihan. We thank you for joining in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube at Mountaineers Now. Give us a like and follow us on X at Mountaineers Now as well. This one's been fun. We'll come back tomorrow with another episode.